Today on Grow with Dr. Jonette, we are making apple pie bars. I was able to get some organic apples from my neighbor around the corner. This is some of his first of his Honeycrisp apples. A lot of people like to use a more tart apple, maybe a Macintosh or even a green apple in apple desserts. I like a sweet apple, and not only is Honeycrisp one of my favorite baking apples, it's also one of my favorite eating apples. So today we're going to be using my Honeycrisps and making some apple pie bars. So let's get cooking. Make sure you watch all the way to the end so you don't miss my simple is smart tips for this recipe. And I have for you also a neuronutrition nugget about why we should add apples to our diet and how it not only helps our brain be healthier, but also helps our body. We're going to start by making the crust. This will actually be the crust for the apple pie bars as well as the topping for the apple pie bars. I'm using my Breville food processor, which is one of my favorite ways to speed up the process of any time I want to mix together a crust, a crumble, and also I use it for things like slicing my apples. I've already pre-sliced the apples. I've added 3 cups of flour to the bowl of the food processor with the cutting blade added to it. We're going to use the food processor to cut in the butter into the flour. I'm adding to the 3 cups of flour a ½ a cup of brown sugar, a teaspoon of apple pie spice, a teaspoon of baking powder, and about a ½ a teaspoon of salt. I use salted butter so I don't add as much salt to the flour. I typically cook with salted butter, and 3/4 of a cup of butter. The butter is room temperature, so it's been softened a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and put this on our food processor, and we're going to just pulse it a few times. What you want it to do is you want to bring the flour together and create kind of some coarse crumbs, so that when you press them together, they pretty much start to stick together. It's a little bit dry. I think I'm going to actually add a little bit more butter to it. So I've got right now 3/4 of a cup of butter, but I think it probably needs close to a cup of butter. So we're going to add another couple of tablespoons of butter to the crust. You want the crust to come together nicely when you press it together. That looks better. There you can see it starting to stick together. Nice coarse sand, and when we press it together, it sticks together. So this is going to make a nice crumble topping and also give us a nice crust for our apple pie bars. I'm going to set this aside and bring our pan over here. I like to add a parchment sling to the pan, and what I usually do is I spray the pan first, just the bottom of the pan first. It helps the parchment sling stay in place. The parchment sling lets me do a couple things. It helps me be able to press the crust into the pan. And then once the parchment sling is in the pan, go ahead and spray it again. We're going to add about half of our crumbs to the pan here. Just want a nice layer of crumbs in the bottom of the pan. That looks like a good layer there. Set this aside, and we're going to use that as our topping for later. I want to remind you to make sure, there we go. It wasn't quite big enough to fold over and press the crumbs down. I've discovered that this is a simple and smart way to press the crumbs in the pan. We're going to bake it at 350 degrees until it's golden brown around the edges. You don't want the whole crust doesn't need to get brown, but the edges you want to get them brown. So about 10 minutes. I'll set my timer for 10 minutes and we'll check it then. And now we're going to go ahead and make the filling for it. So when it comes out of the oven, we'll be able to add our filling to it. I've already cut up about 4 cups, about 6 cups for 4 relatively large apples. For the apples, you may prefer a tart apple like a Macintosh or a Jonathan or a sweeter apple. And I'm using a Honeycrisp apple for this recipe. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and let's make the filling for our apple pie bars. The best part of the apple pie bars, the apple inside. I'm gonna start with adding the sugar to the cream cheese, and to the sugar I like to add a little bit of thickener. This is a fruit pectin thickener. It's called instant clear gel, but it's basically just a fruit pectin thickener. I use that a lot in my pies, and anytime I have something that's going to be juicy with fruit. The thing I like about it best is that it instantly thickens so that you know how thick your dessert is going to get, or the fruit in your dessert is going to get. I'm going to go ahead and add the cream cheese. And all that cream cheese off of there. 2 tablespoons of plain yogurt. Some apple pie spice, about a teaspoon, and an egg. And last, one of my favorite ingredients in any apple dessert that I make is boiled cider. You can purchase boiled cider online. If you go to my website, you can actually find a link for this recipe to both where you can get the boiled cider as well as where you can get the fruit pectin. My timer's going off, so let's check the crust and see where we're at with the crust. Oh, that looks great. So we're going to just set it aside here. You can see it's a little browned around the edges, and I'm going to set it over here to cool while we're finishing up our recipe here. Once we get that all added, I can smell the apple pie spice, the cider. Smells just like home-baked apple pie. There's probably going to be a few lumps in it. That's not a problem because we're going to go ahead and fold all of the apples into it, and those few lumps are not going to matter. So let's go ahead and add our apples to it. There's a lot of apples here. I made this recipe a couple of weeks ago, and I take it in for everybody at work to kind of test. And the feedback I got from pretty much everybody was it needs more apples. So the last time I made it, I used 4 cups of apples. So this time I've increased the apples to 6 cups, and I'm having a bit of gonna probably need a little, well, maybe not, bit of a difficulty here getting them all incorporated. So I would say when you make this recipe, go ahead and get a little bit bigger bowl for mixing all of your filling with your apples. Because what you want to do is you want to get that filling mixed in among the apples as it has that thickener in it. You'll notice I'm wearing glasses in this video. I got myself a new pair of glasses that don't have the glare on them. I'm at the age in my life where reading glasses make my life much easier. You can see what I'm doing so much better with some reading glasses. Ready to add this to our crust here. Get those wings out of the way. Don't want to fold them in underneath the apples. And that does a pretty good job of almost filling our pan. You could probably, this is a 9 by 9 inch pan. And when you make it, if you have a 10 by 10 inch pan, that would work as well. But we're getting it all in here. You can see the apples are sliced very thin. If you're don't have something that can slice the apples quite this thin, you might want to maybe use 4 or 5 cups of apples. Probably 5 cups of apples instead of the 6 cups that I have here. That looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and get our crumbs in there, and we're gonna put it back in the oven. We're gonna bake it. I wanna make some as I do this. I like to grab a few handfuls here and make some more clumps of crumbs on the very top. The bottom part I'll usually quite often leave more like coarse sand, because it helps kind of get it down in among the apples and absorb any extra moisture that you might have as a result of all those extra apples. But I also like some, Farmer Fred especially, he loves crumb cake. He likes to have some nice big crumbs on the top as well. So we're gonna get this in the oven again and bake it for 40 minutes at 350 degrees. The apple pie bars are baking, let's talk about our neuronutrition nugget. Our neuronutrition nugget today is apples. Why are apples so good for your body as well as your brain? There's a recent article out in Neuroscience News talking about the brain-gut connection. And the more we learn about the brain-gut connection, the more we realize that our gut actually has a brain as well. And it communicates with the rest of our body to help keep the rest of our body healthy. Apples, in order for our gut to stay healthy, we need to be able to be regular and not have a lot of constipation or diarrhea. Fiber in your diet is a great way to help regulate your digestive system. Apples have a lot of fiber in addition to other things that are good for your brain, but the most important thing in apples is probably the fiber. And when you eat apples, like an apple a day, there's a reason they say the doctor recommends an apple a day. And now we have the neuroscience to understand why an apple a day is important to not only your brain health, but also your body health. It helps regulate your digestive system and gives your gut the fiber that it needs to stay healthy and have a healthy, what's called microbiome. Your gut's microbiome is all the healthy bacteria that live in your gut that help keep it healthy and help keep us regulated. So add some apples to your diet. You can eat them raw. It's a great way to eat them, or you can also eat them in an apple dessert, as a baked apple. So many different ways that you can enjoy apples. Our apple pie bars have been cooling for a bit. I took them out of the oven. The last 10 minutes of baking them, I covered them with foil. As you can see, they were starting to get a little brown on the top, and I didn't want them to get over brown. So I took them out, I covered them with foil for the last 10 minutes of baking. I baked this recipe for a total of 40 minutes. I'm going to just cut around the edge of the pan here. Loosen the apple pie bars, and we are going to lift it right out of that pan onto our cutting board here. Move it up a bit, and we can cut it into pieces. The apples are still a little bit crunchy, which is how I like them in my apple pie. If you like your apples really soft after the pie is baked, you might want to go ahead and continue to bake your apple pie bars for another, probably I would bake them for another like 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes tops. Bake them for probably close to an hour, which is how long I recommend that you bake an apple pie if you want the apples in it to be soft. And I like to cut them into small bars here. And see, they've got some little bit of the crunchies falling off of it. And let's get a little spatula and take a look here. That is a beautiful apple pie bar. You can see the base here with nice layers of apple and the nice crust on top. A perfect few bites of an apple pie bar. You can cut them into bigger pieces if you want. I like the smaller pieces. A few less calories per serving, and you can serve a few more people. There you have it, our apple pie bars. I hope you enjoyed cooking along with me today, if you were able to cook along, or just enjoyed watching this recipe. If you found this content valuable and enjoyed cooking along today, please click the like button and subscribe, as it helps my analytics and helps me be able to bring you more great healthy recipes, as well as information about how nutrition and what we eat affects how our brain functions and how our body functions. In addition, it'll help me achieve one of my personal goals, which is to get 10,000 subscribers by the end of this year. For more information, please go to growwithdrjohnette.com.